Hello, and thank you for joining me for part 3 of t-shirt transformation. In this section, we are going to transform a t-shirt into a dress. We're going to use techniques from the video part 1. We're going to use that bias tape technique that I used to finish the neckline. This time we're going to do it on some armpits. And we're also going to use the cutting technique from part 2 to cut this into a tank dress with a low back. So you want to save your largest t-shirt for your dress project. This one is a size 3X. So as you can see, when I'm just going to throw it on. I throw it on. It's nice and long. Almost reaches to my knees. So now I'm going to find the waistline. So if you need to find your waistline, you can lean over and right in the crease where your hands fall, that's your waist. So you want to just go ahead and put a little mark on your side waist on either side, and go ahead and mark the small of your back. And we're ready to start marking. Okay, so now you're going to take your ruler, and you're going to measure from your small of your back mark down to the hem. Now I'm actually going to give this shirt to someone who's 2 inches taller than me, so that means that her small of her back is going to be probably about 1/2 inch lower than mine. So I'm going to go ahead and take that into account. And I'm at 16.5 right now, so I'm just going to lower this right down to 16. Get myself a little mark. Go over a few inches, staying aligned with the 16 mark on my ruler. Now just take your ruler and match up all your points. Okay, now flip it over and notice where you marked your side waist. This is going to be the new side seam. So you want to give yourself a little bit of seam allowance. So I like to leave 3/8. So I'm going to go to my mark. Actually, I'm going to leave myself 1 inch just because this shirt is not for me. So better to leave a little bit more room than less. And I'm just going to go straight down with that line. Go over to your other side and do the exact same thing. Okay, now I'm just going to connect these two. Give it a little, box it out a little bit, because this is going to be our new side seam. This is going to be where we start our armpit curvature. So now we're going to use the technique from the previous video to create the tank top armpit holes. So I can kind of see where I'm going to want this line to be, probably right about here. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure from my side, my shoulder seam rather. And it looks like if I give myself 3.5 inches, that'll be good. So I'm measuring 3.5. Going to keep that 3.5 No, I'm seeing my curve wants to already start tapering, so I'm gonna go 3 1/4 for the next 3. Go for 3 1/4 right here. Just adding a little bit more because of the depth of the pit. You want it to be a nice arc. Just gonna make this a little bit darker. If you have a hip curve ruler, you can just go ahead and take your hip curve ruler and plop it right on there and trace it. Okay, so now I am gonna end up cutting out this neckline because I'm gonna make it backless. So I'm just gonna redraw my neckline real quick. And I'm thinking I want my straps to be 4 inches wide. So I'm gonna repeat what I did on the first side to the second side. So if you forget what measurement you did, you can just remeasure. So 3 1/2 inches. From the seam. Then I did 3 1/4. 3. 3 1/4. And I just matched that right up, my little squared off section. Connect those dots. Give myself the 4-inch shoulder. And now I'm going to redraw the neckline. So I don't really want it to go much lower in the front, so I'm just gonna give myself like 1/4 of an inch right at the center front. Now I'm gonna taper my way back up to, what is the difference here? 1 inch. So go 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. And now do the same to the other side. 1/2 inch, 3/4. And go ahead and connect your dots. And just make sure you like the way that looks. I think it could go down a little more in the front there, just for evenness. Perfect. So these yellow lines are going to be the new cut lines. We're going to flip it over and do the back. Okay, so just fold your shirt a little bit and maybe stick your hand in here just so that you can extend the lines that you've got going on the front into the back. Okay. So I'm gonna want my straps to kind of taper in towards the center a little bit. Not too much, just kind of following the natural angle that you have going. Match your dot that you just made with the ruler, aligning with your center back line. And go ahead and draw that right in. Now I'm just going to give myself a few markings right at 4 inches wide for the strap. Go ahead and connect those dots. Now you could get creative with the shape of your strap. You could make it skinnier at the bottom if you wish. You could make it skinnier in general, but don't make it too skinny, because remember, there is going to be some fabric eaten up when we finish it off with the bias tape. Go ahead and copy what you did on the first side to the second. There's one marking more that we need to make. So if you take a look at where your side seam is, you'll notice that your armpit side on the front might be a little higher than your back waistline. So go ahead and measure. This should be 16 inches. Oh, actually, turns out it's 18. Oh, 16 is my back, that's right. So this is 18 inches right here. Just maybe you can see it better if I do it in the blue chalk. And this is 16. Pretty sure, yes. So now we're just gonna sweep this out and at an angle and make a line that's 18 inches long, because we need these two to match up and we need the bottom hems to match up. So you just want to make sure that you cut your back at an angle so that all of the seams can align. And you may notice that, yeah, you have an inch or so extra, so see, because this measurement is 16 and this measurement is 18, and we go at an angle and we could get an extra inch comfortably, but we still have an inch to go, we're just going to true that into the back. So go ahead. This is where a curved ruler would be very handy, but most people don't have those, so I will just teach you how to do it without it. But if you have a curved ruler, you just put your curved ruler right here and curve it right into the back. If you don't, just go ahead and make yourself a 1/2 inch point, a few inches out, and a 1/4 inch point, and connect those. Okay, you're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Try and get it flat under the area you're going to be working with. Just measure to make sure this is the same. Oh, it is a little bigger, but that's probably because this hem is a little bit off. T-shirts are always a little funky. The hem is never perfect. So we are at 18 1/4. Just go ahead and move that down to 18. Mark it so that I know. And go ahead and connect. Bing, bing, bing. Drawing that angle in. And then easing that extra inch into the back. Okay, now let's get cutting. Okay, now we can start the cutting process. So grab your scissors, and I would start with one of the side seams go right along your line. Follow your line in the back. Okay, so I just cut out the back panel. Go ahead and put that aside. Now I'm going to cut out my front. The armpit can be a little bit tricky. You just kind of want to do small sections and flatten out the section that you're working on, and then keep moving and re-flattening. Now I'm going to cut out the other armpit. Okay, almost there. Just have to cut out this horseshoe shape that is the back straps and the neckline. And voila, we're done cutting. So we have one last thing to prep before we sew, and that is cutting the bias tape and cutting the elastic. So for the bias tape, you're going to use the exact same technique that we did in part 1 of the video. Just roll yourself some. Face those armpit holes towards you. And just kind of guide your bias tape along the edge, measuring how much you need. Now give yourself an extra inch or so, just in case. Now you can go ahead and just copy that length for the other side. And now we need to measure how long this is. So use the same technique. Okay, and the bias tape is cut. So I'm just gonna squish all that over to the side. I'm gonna take my back panel, grab my ruler, hopefully it's long enough. Yeah, basically. So I'm at like 25 inches for the back panel waist. That is going to need to get gathered up by the elastic, because that is not going to hug the body if I don't put an elastic in it. So I'm making this for someone with about a 30-inch waist, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut my elastic at 15, which is half. Now, the back side of your waist is smaller than the front side of your waist. If you want your dress to be on the tighter side, you're gonna wanna cut this elastic slightly less than half of your waist measurement. So if your waist measurement is a 28, half of that's 14, I would cut my elastic at 12 and a half. But if you want your dress to be kind of loose, you're making it for someone else, you don't know the exact measurements, going for half is always a solid plan. So your elastic measurement's probably going to be between 11 and 18. All right, now we are ready to sew. Okay, so we're gonna sew in the bias tape. I'm gonna start with doing the front neckline. We're gonna use the exact same technique that we used in part 1 of the video. So open your tape like a book. Starting on the right side of the fabric, at the end of your strap, we're just going to sew right along, right in the center of the book. Just keep a little tension on your bias tape, pull it, keep pulling it a little bit. Be sure to pivot as much as you need to when you're doing that tight curve of the neck, or any tight curves for that matter. Okay, once you have that part on, just going to clip our threads. Now we're going to turn this, fold it in, and we're going to sew right on the inside, right there. But of course, you have to do it starting at the direction that you just ended with. So alright, so you can see that we just stitched that down. If you look at it from the right side, just got a nice little clean fold over edge there. So now it's time to do the same exact bias tape technique on the armpit holes. Run it through the other side. Alright, one side is done. Go ahead and complete the other side. Alright, now that your front is done, we can move on to the back. So you're going to want to get a bias tape that is wider than your elastic. So you're just going to make a little casing for it. So go ahead and cut your piece of bias tape the length of your back. Give yourself a little extra just in case. Now flip your t-shirt so it's the right side facing you. Flip your bias tape, open like a book, and now open one of the pages and align that with the far edge. You want to stitch right in that crease if you can. And voila, that's attached. You're going to flip it over to the wrong side. Just go ahead and stitch right along the far edge of your bias tape. See, we made like a nice little case. Gonna need a safety pin. Just pop your safety pin right through your elastic, and we're gonna feed it through. Okay, and just feed it until you get to the end. You don't want to lose your elastic like I just did. Give it a little stitch down. keep threading. So you get it out, you have a little tail, let it fall to the edge there and give it one more stitch. Okay, now we have the back of the skirt done. So now we just have to attach the two pieces. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and line up the side seams. And when you're doing these, you want to face the fabric and pin it so that you're sewing from the armpit down to the hem. You may need to stretch one piece just a little bit to make it meet perfectly at the hem. You can trim this because it gets a little bulky in there. Now, before I do my other side, I'm just going to decide where I want my straps to fall. I kind of even out the gathering of the skirt so it looks all nice and pretty. Give it a fold, and just mark that fold with a little pin. I'm gonna grab my strap, just align it with that pin, pull out all of the fullness so that it's nice and flat, just kind of scoot it to the side there, and I'm gonna pin that down. Now, I'm going to sew just through the front layer and not through the elastic. So I'm going to flip it onto the front. Just go ahead. And stitch real close to that edge there. You can also do this part before you put in the elastic, if you so choose. See how that looks? And you can still pull the elastic through. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Voila! Don't forget to take this pin out of the back before you try it on. You're gathering back. This is what it's looking like. We just have one more seam to go. So flip the whole thing inside out. Align your last side seam. We are done. So it looks like inside out. Now, the last step is just to do a little ironing, make it look nice and perfect, and we're good to go. So you might want to press out the areas where you did the bias tape. Just to make those straps nice and straight.